Coach, sometimes Brett, sometimes Coach Little Z, right? It has lots of different names
I have a
that.
lot of aliases. Big Boy Brett, Bitcoin Brett, Big Daddy. I got Little Z. I got stuff out there.
All right. Me, I just have my name. That's it. So, welcome tonight. We're glad that you're here. Tonight, we're going to talk about managing group dynamics. And I'm sure that each and every one of you, just like us, have been in groups that, I don't know, it just seemed magical, right? Everything went just swell, and people were talking and interacting and feeling good and complimenting. And I don't mean like saying nice job, but I mean being complimentary of each other, and we just think, wow, this is going to be great. And then the group meets again maybe 2 weeks later, and nothing's working, right? I mean, it's just a disaster. So managing those dynamics are tricky, and we have to learn how to do that. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And the person you can't see behind the scenes is Robert, and he's managing his own dynamics behind the scenes, and going to keep us on the straight and narrow, so that we can talk about that. But just know that if managing group dynamics was easy, everybody would do that. And it's not easy, it's difficult. And those of you who work with youth know that that can be very challenging to, and we call it classroom management. But what you're really doing is trying to manage the environment and the dynamics of the people going on. I've often said that if you go into a classroom and there's only you, it's easily managed. It's only problematic when humans arrive. So, welcome, glad you're here. For some of you, this may be the very last week of school. For others of you, you may have been out for a week and been able to start summer programming already. So, let's get started, Robert. And what's the first question?
All, all right. Our first question is, what are the key challenges of managing group dynamics? Straight to the point.
Exactly. And so I'm going to start with that, Brett, and then I'm going to pitch it to you. So I think that part of the challenge in group dynamics is that everybody has their own style. They have their own way of being. They have their own way they interact. They have their own way of processing. Some people process very quickly. Other people have to mull it over. Some people need, just more time. So I think that's challenging. There's such diversity in a group. And yet, that's what makes a group valuable, is this diversity. So it's not that we want everybody to be just alike, but that's what's created when you have these diverse groups and you have to manage them. And the other thing that I think can be challenging is that people don't know how to resolve conflict. So I can be in conflict with myself. I don't have to be in conflict with anybody else. But when there's a conflict where you don't necessarily agree on something, how do you disagree and not be disagreeable? How do you say, I understand what you're saying? How do you listen to all the way through and then say, but I don't agree on this point? And then how do you take that when somebody doesn't agree with you? So there's this conflict piece. So I would say that the two biggest challenges are the diversity of the people in the group, which is a good thing. It's just challenging. And then that people don't know how to resolve disputes between them. So, Coach, it's up to you.
So, right, in certain questions, you could, list off 3, 5, 7 different ones. In this case, you can list 57 reasons. So let's talk about maybe the other direction, right? And yet, that's only one thing, and you don't deal with it, which is
Right.
not a solution at all, right? So
Right.
I like what you say. So, as being a sports guy, they say styles make fights, right? And so when you're talking about in the boxing world, styles make fights. And so some of the best boxers of all time, they get with a certain style and they just can't beat them. They can beat everybody else, but this style, that's not the case. So if we take that as a touch point, then we're in trouble, because what we have to do is take all styles of communication, all styles of personality, all styles of leadership, all styles of, right, we can go on, and we have to figure out how do we make these things come together for the greater good. And that's what makes it extremely difficult. So the second thing I would say, as you guys know, or you've been around a little bit, I think in systems, right? I call them structured schematics, systems, processes, procedures, protocols, steps, so on and so forth. And this has come up 4 times today. So I was mentoring a couple people today, and then I answered early in the morning a question on Quora. And it's just like it just came up all day. And it's funny because Gma and I, so she does have a second name. She does have an alias. She's just not Dr. Cindy. She's also Gma, which stands for grandma. But anyway, we know this because we figured this out over the last 30, 35 years. Every single place that we go, whether it's our own business, whether it's consulting somebody else's business, whether it's a classroom, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a dot, 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 you fill in the blank, it comes down to 3 things. And we call that the trifecta. And that comes down to mindset, right? Like I was teaching the kid today, if you think at the top of your head, that's where your mind's at. And then each shoulder, it would kind of be the trifecta or a triangle, so to speak, right? And so on one shoulder, you're going to have the systems, the structures, the schematics. That's usually where people really get into a bad spot because they don't build those systems, structures, processes, procedures out. And so people just go and they run amok, and it can only go so far. If you think about the Googles of the world, although they may be in big trouble, but they have systems and structures and processes and procedures. And whether you like Elon Musk or you don't, same thing. Or if you talk about New England Patriots at one time, they had this great mindset at the top of the head. On, let's say, their left shoulder, they had these great structures and schematics and systems and processes and procedures. But then we go over to the right shoulder, and you have to have the players. That's the third part of it that makes that triangle or that trifecta come together: mindset, structured schematics, and then the players. Well, the New England Patriots, they won a whole bunch, right? And they had all 3 of those in place. Well, then the best player in the world, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Tom Brady, left. And all of a sudden, they didn't have that anymore. But then he went to Tampa Bay, and they won another championship. So let's not get it twisted that a great player can really elevate the other 2. But typically, you have to have all 3 of those things. And my guess is that Tom Brady brought the systems and the structures and the mindset together over to Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay was a playoff team, but they weren't the best of the best. So in the end, I know I've said a lot, but I would have, there's a lot to say on the subject, right? People are tough. It's challenging dealing with people because you have all the nuances in their background, and they're a collection of their genetics and DNA and experiences and circumstances and all of these things, right? And so we're trying to, think about marriages. There's 2 people, 67% divorce rate. That'll tell you something. That's how tough it is. What about if you stick 3 people in the same room, 5 people, 7 people, 20 people, all going supposedly for the same goal? You're still asking for a lot of trouble. Now, I could go on for another 5 minutes, but I'm going to shut up, so I'll probably overstayed my welcome.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay, thanks for that. So, Robert, what's next?
The next question is, how can I encourage positive interactions with a group?
Gandhi said that best. You've got to be the change you want to see. And that's challenging because we all can get stepped on, right? And we can be, or maybe things didn't go as well as we expected during the day, or any other number of things. But what I do believe is this: if you're working with a child and the child manifests one of the 3 Ds, disrespect, right? This defiance, right? This disruption, and they get on your nerves, and you are disrespectful to them, you have lost that kid, because what you've said to them is be respectful. And this is what it looks like. And they're the ones who need it the most, because what they're trying to do, in my opinion, is see, do you really mean that? Do you really mean what you say? So I think role modeling is incredibly important, and to just be that person. So if you want trash picked up, you've got to pick up trash, right? Whatever that is you want, you need to do it yourself. And then I do think that part of this systems and structures and schematics is having roles identified. Who needs to do what? And when do they need to do it? So maybe you rotate roles, right? On the first week, this person does it. On the second week, somebody else. But that has to be very clear, because when they get muddled, people don't know what to do. So those would be two things that I would do, is to really model what you want to see. And if you have to excuse yourself to go somewhere and rant and rave in the mirror, that's fine. And then come back collected and be that person that you want them to be. And then also to be sure that the roles and responsibilities are laid out. So now this is back to you, Brett.
I just call Robert and rant and rave. That's what I do. Hey, what was the question again, Robert?
Yeah, the question was, how can I encourage positive interactions with a group?
Gotcha. Okay. I thought that's what it was, but I was really deep in thought with Gmon there. I forgot the doggone question. Well, look, I mean, I think, setting the norms and the agreements, right? And part of the norms and agreements should be positive interactions. Now, I'm a little bit against the grain, right? I'm like a salmon swimming upstream because I'm a little bit more like, hey, not everything has to be positive all the time, right? I think there's a place for positivity, and I think there's a place for criticism and to do better and to get better too. I think it's a both and versus an either or. But positive interactions is the question. So we want to make sure that that's part of the norms and the agreements, right? And so when we talk about this accountability formula, we say clear expectations, monitor the end result, hold people accountable if they choose not to hold themselves accountable. Well, if you talk about that and you let them decide what the norms and agreements are, which should be positive interactions, again, I've already played king and queen of the world. If they don't bring that up, I could say, hey, what about if we have positive interactions as part of the agreements and norms? And so I find that goes really well because they commit to that. And then all you're doing is helping them to monitor the end result. And then you're holding them accountable. Most people, they hear accountability as negative. I don't. Accountability can be positive or negative. So we have what we call downright diagnostics with what we do here. And we say, what do you like? And how will you celebrate that? What do you not like? And how will you pivot and adjust? Right. And then the third part is that, what about if you're undecided? We'll ask questions and make it a like or a dislike, because in the people business, everybody's so different and so gray. Anything that you can make black and white, that's why structured schematics or systems, processes, or procedures are so important. Then what it does is it allows for them to be gray, and you're not also piling gray on top of gray. And then it's like nobody knows what's going on, so to speak. So the other thing I would say is that incorporate fun, like low stake activities to build rapport and positive interactions. If you have like a management system, we used to do like point system. Every time we heard somebody that would say something sincerely positive, they get out of control. Sometimes the little guys, everything's positive. Oh, she's great. Oh, she's great. Oh, she's the best. Oh, she's nice. Look at she's this. Oh, we're like, no. We're talking about sincere, positive interactions.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Sometimes when we do activities with kids, they are competitive, right? And so if you're going to do a competitive activity, you've got to kind of set those ground rules in advance so that they know that somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. Chances are that it's not going to be a tie. And then how do you win graciously? How do you lose graciously? But you can replace those competitive activities, do the same activity, but do it in a cooperative way. So perhaps if you're playing soccer, instead of saying who's going to win and who's going to lose, you're going to say, if you're playing the very best you can, is it possible for the other team for you guys to score the same number of points? Or can you reach 10 points together, right? But you can't just let them kick the ball into the goal, right? But you can help it be that way so that they're working together towards a common goal. And sometimes by changing the shifting from competitive to cooperative, you can change the tenor of the activity.
Yeah, I remember we used to do back in the day. We learned this maybe about 3 to 5 years in when we really started working with the adults who work with kids. Both and, right? So we had employee of the month because that's life, right? There's the Michael Jordans of the world, the best players. But we also did employees. So everybody had a chance, if they met this certain standard, to be employees, plural, of the month. And then there would be the one that would just rise to the top, deservedly so. So I think a lot of times, and I learned that from GMA a long time ago, we always think of these either or situations when it can be a both and situation.
Right. And that is so completely different than giving a 13th place trophy, right? There's a standard, there's a bar that you set. If you meet the bar, you'll be recognized. And then some people will go way above and beyond the bar. And then that's who gets the final recognition. I think that sometimes we think we have to reward every kid, right? The M&M. Everything they do gets an M&M. And that's not really the case. Okay, so Robert, you're up.
Okay, our next question is what role does group size play in dynamics?
You know, it depends on what you do with the size of the group, right? Because what you need to do is give people opportunities to interact with one another. And so if you keep a group of 50, that's going to be much different. And what you'll find probably is it's maybe reasonably easy to manage because nobody will say anything except people who are pretty forthright and more aggressive. But what you want to do, in my opinion, is give people lots of different opportunities to talk with one another and to process with different people so that the group is constantly being broken down into small groups. So one of my favorite opportunities for people to get to talk is called inside-outside circles. And what you do is you create an inside circle, let's say of 25 people. We've done this before with hundreds, but let's say 25 people on the inside, and they turn with their backs to the center, right? Their backs to each other and they're facing out. And then you have the other 25 people in the group go and stand in front of one of them. And then you offer questions for them to discuss. And then what happens is that you rotate the inside circle, maybe 3 or 4 people, and have them have another conversation. And then you rotate the outside circle, 3 or 4 people, so that you are managing the group by putting them with different people over and over so that they can process. So maybe I'm a fast processor and I'm my first person is a slow processor. And so we have to figure that out. But then when I rotate, maybe I get another fast processor, right? So that you're giving people lots of opportunity to appreciate the diversity of the group. So I think that if you leave a big group, then it's really, it's not interactive. It's going to be directive more. If you want it to be interactive, you're going to have to set that up so that the group can interact and communicate with one another. So, Coach, how about you?
Well, I'm sure I'll get some hate for these first couple words, but I'll run the risk. Size matters, right? So when you talk about in my first class or my first teaching job, I had 16 special day kids. And I'll come back at the end and I'll tell you about one kid that came into my class. So 16 special day kids, that could be a lot, right? If they're, one severely, challenged kid or handicapped kid, you got to have one-on-one, right? So it also depends on the person that comes in. But I say that size does matter. I say it in a joking way at first. But I remember back in the day, I can't remember the exacts, but I think we, in teaching, like in the instructional day, maybe there was like a 20 kid ratio, right? And if you got 21 kids, it was still cool. But if you got 22, it was a problem. Then later on, it went up to like 28. And you figured out 28's cool. But if you got the 29th, you're like, uh-oh, we're in big trouble. I had a class of 150 in PE. What's an extra 1? Nothing. An extra 2? Nothing. One extra 3? Nothing. Extra, right? I mean, eventually it would have been an issue, but so a lot of it depends on the setting and the context and who the person is and, what kind of kids are you dealing with and all the above. The other thing is this. So in my special day class, I had all these kids. It took me about 3 months to get them where I wanted them, so to speak, right? Where they were managing the environment, they were guiding their own behaviors, they were doing all of that. And then Charles Manson came into my class. And that wasn't his real name, but I'll protect his real name. He came in and he had the dead eyes, right? This dude completely screwed up, one person completely screwed up my whole class in one period. And I'm like, man, right? So when you talk about size, it's not just the ginormity, whether it's 150 people or whether it's 16 kids and then one extra comes in. It matters, right? It matters who it is. It matters what your skill level is and so on and so forth. And it didn't matter what I said to this kid. He was not going to listen to me. So he got picked up 2 days later by the police and went to jail. Well, I mean, he was just one of those kids. I remember I got into a big argument with one of my professors back in the day when I was going through getting my degree. They said, "Oh, there's the 2%ers of the kids." I said, "What you mean?" He said, "Yeah, 2%. Like they're just no good." I said, "You're crazy. You're full of." I won't say exactly what I said, but I wasn't happy about it. But the reality is that unfortunately, there are certain kids that just need more one-on-one type stuff, and they just can't be with the group. But in the end, size does matter.
Yes. Okay, so Robert, what's next?
Our next question is, how can I address conflicts that arise in group settings?
I we've talked before. I know Brett's mentioned it a bunch of times about prevention. So instead of waiting until the conflict happens and then trying to resolve it then, which is never very productive, it's good if you can help kids learn strategies for resolving conflict before there is a conflict. And then they can practice and they can do scenarios. And there are what I call the simple conflict resolutions that you could do by doing paper, rock, scissors in any format that you would like. Another thing that you can do is odds or evens. And to do that, you go 1, 2, 3, just like with paper, rock, scissors, and you put out a number of fingers. And then you roll a dice. And if it's an odd number and you have an odd number of fingers out, you win. If it's even, and so forth. But you can teach those simple ways. But then it's also important to be able to say, I think I hear what you're saying. Is this what you mean? I don't agree with that. This is how I see it. And that's a polite way to not agree. And you shouldn't agree when you don't agree. The idea is to get as close to another person as you can without compromising who you are. And that's the challenge. But I think that if you're preventative, maybe you teach the kids how to do a peace walk. Maybe you teach the kids how to do iMessages. I when I notice this, I feel this, and this is what I think. Can we talk about it, right? So that they, instead of giving you messages like it's your fault, you aren't doing it right, to speak in iMessages. So those would be preventative things that you can do in a people are polarized, and then you've got to try and undo that. So, coach?
So I used to tell my middle school kids, the special day kids, I'm like, look, you got 3 or 4 minutes in between the passing periods, and you got lunch, you got all that. So you use the restroom during those time frames. I said, but if you just happen to have to go so bad, we'll play paper, rock, scissors for it. And I lost every time, right? Susan and I used to do that. My wife and I used to do that answering the phone back in the day, the landline. I'm like, why do I even bother playing? I'm just going to answer the phone. Well, anyway, this kid goes paper, rock, and he goes dynamite. And as he's running out of the room, he goes, I gotta go bad. I thought, man, that was a classic. So anyway, that's my touch point on that. I think we need to focus on solutions and not who the blame is, right? I know people have told me in the past and even in the present, like that they think I'm blaming them, like, oh, it's your fault, it's this, it's da da da, whatever. And it's like, look, that maybe I'm not choosing my words wisely, or maybe I'm not saying it correctly. But in the end, I just want the end result to be there. I want the end result to be there for you. I want the end result to be there for me. So yeah, if I'm frustrated, maybe my words aren't as good as when I'm not frustrated, right? If I've said it 23 times, then yeah, maybe on the 24th time or 25th time, maybe I'm not going to be as nice or, as like, one of those types of things. But in the end, I'm still going to focus on the solutions. Because to me, who cares who it is to blame? It doesn't matter. If you're dealing with a group, in the end, we've got to get from A to B and eventually B to C and C to D. So what does it matter whether it's my fault, your fault, or somebody else's fault? So we talk a lot about who versus what. I was talking with the kid I was mentoring today. He's a 20-year-old kid. He just started with us this week. And I said, how are you with criticism? And he says, I'm not very good with it. And I said, okay, so let's talk about the who versus the what. And I said, so when you hear criticism, do you think like who you are is not okay? He goes, yeah. And I said, well, that's not how I look at it. I look at it, it's what you did. So it's not who you are, it's what you did. Now, I said, if you do the same behavior 100 times in a row, maybe it does become who you are. But who am I to say whether it's 100, maybe it's 101, maybe it's 150, maybe it's 200, right? And I could tell the wheels were turning in this young kid's head. Like, oh, it's not who I am, it's just what I did. And he goes, I think I could be better with criticism. I said, exactly. Let's talk about if it's a conflict between two people. I'm going to say what I'm going to say if I start it. Hey, I don't like the blouse you're wearing, Cindy. She's going to say, well, I do like it because it's a nice color. I don't agree with that, Cindy, because it's showing your armpits, and I don't think that's appropriate. And she's going to say, well, my armpits have deodorant on. Whatever she's going to say, right? That's it. If we can't come to some kind of resolution, if I get two and she gets two, because what happens is the person that started, they always want the last word. And it's like, no. If you start it, the other person gets the last word. You go, they go. You go, they go. And then what we would tell them is come back and revisit that a day later, 2 days later, 5 days later, and see if you can get a little further. Because usually what it is what? It's that you're heated. You're upset. You're mad. It's conflict. It's the end of the world, man. If I didn't get that girlfriend in 8th grade, oh my gosh, she liked Joe instead of me. Oh, what am I going to do? No, it's not like you're on a ship and the ship's sinking. That's a problem. When you don't get a girlfriend in 8th grade, that's not a problem. But that's not what they think, and their perception is their reality, right? Whether it's real or not is insignificant because it is their reality. So I think that it's all of those things and a couple others I could say, but I'm going to stop there.
No, that was good advice. Yep. Focus on the solution for sure. Okay, Robert, you're up.
All right. Our next question is, how can I what strategies promote collaboration among group members?
I think that clear expectations really matter because what you want from a group is that everybody's rowing in the same way. And actually, I don't want to say a group. A group is are people that kind of get together, but they don't really have a common purpose. They're not focused on where they're headed. They're just kind of hanging out together. So I think what you're really trying to do is build a team. And when you build a team, I always like to think of the rowing teams, right? So there's the person that's calling out row, right, or whatever they call, and everybody else is doing the work to make that move forward. So you have somebody who's directing it and keeping everybody in sync. And maybe that's your job if you're the frontline staff person in an expanded learning program, right? You're the person who's saying, okay, this is where we're at and we're going to keep going. But a team works together and they realize that they're better together. And then it's really important that you reward as a team. So, I'm not the sports person, but I do know that in Super Bowl, everybody wins a ring. Everybody on the team wins a ring. And some people win millions of dollars in a bonus, right? And others don't. But that's okay because you can reward the individual, but you also have to reward and focus on the team. Because if you don't, then they're competing with one another because there's only one top spot. And so I think that that's really important. That you do that is that you reward as a team, but you also build them together as a team and not just a group that happens to maybe be going in the same direction, but not really, right? So they need to have a clear vision, clear expectations of what they're doing, and then encourage them to work as a team. Oh, I do want to say this. There's personal accountability, but there's also social accountability. So personally, I need to hold myself responsible. But if I'm working as a team, I can also help somebody else hold themselves responsible, right? By pointing it out, because that's what team members do for one another. So now I'm going to pitch it to you, and I'm not going to interrupt again.
Yeah, so that's the same thing we said earlier, right? Employee of the month, employees, right? You want to be able to put that out there as a shared goal, right? When you talk about a team, it's okay that there's going to be somebody better than everybody else. That's what makes Michael Jordan special, right? It's just or
Right.
LeBron or Kobe or whoever you think's number one. But that doesn't mean that, right? Because I remember I had this seventh grade boy. He was playing up on me, playing up on the eighth grade team. And I said, "Oh, you're all that in a bag of rocks, right?" I know it's a bag of chips, but my mom says bag of rocks. And I said, "So you think you're all that?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, well, pick the 5 worst people." And he's a pretty tall kid, even in eighth grade, he's probably 6'1" or 2. Pick all these little 4-footers, right? He had 5 of them. So he played them, and they beat the dog out of him. And I said, "Well, I thought you were the best." "Well, I am the best." "Well, it's going to take a team, bro. Like, you can't just be all that. You got to rely on your teammates too, right?" I said, "I could have made it only 3 versus 1, and you still would have lost. They would have wore you down eventually, as good as you are." I said, "Now you would have probably beat 2 of them," right? And so I think it's really, teaching people about the shared goals. Another thing that I like to do is use either problem solving or project based tasks, right? Because it's all inclusive. It takes everybody, right? So we got Gma, who's the doctor on our team. And I tell everybody she's as smart as you can be without being dumb. They go, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, Einstein was real smart, but he couldn't drive a car." I said, "My mom's as smart as you can be and still be practical. She could take whatever you give her and she's going to make it practical for you so that you can do that." Right? Then we got Robert on the other side of things. Right? He doesn't need to be the sage on the stage. He's behind the scenes, but he makes sure that we're taken care of. He makes sure that the live stream's working. He's trying to figure out how to promote it better. He's trying to, dot, dot, dot. I haven't figured out my role yet, but I'm working on it, right? So it takes a team to be able to ultimately to get to the spot that we want. Now, what we don't want is the American Idol concept, right? So some of these American Idols, well, lately all of them can sing, but some of them can't sing, right? And they think they can sing. And it's like, "Oh, no, I need to be the singer in this group." And I'm like, "I don't think so." And like Gma said a couple weeks ago, she's not going to be the one that's going to keep the basket, but she can be the one that keeps the score. Or maybe somebody else can bring the supplies, the cones or the basketballs or whatever. So as long as you understand what your role is within that team, and we try to maximize your role, and that's where I start with everybody when I hire them. I say, "Let me look at your caption. What's your WIFM? Let me tune into the FM dial of your radio station. What are you wanting?" And they say whatever it is that they're wanting. And I say, "Great. Let me begin with it in mind, help you reverse engineer it. And now you are here at the kiosk that says you are here and you're wanting to get over here in the mall. What do you do next?" You can only take one step. You can understand the 20 steps, but you can only take one step. Inch by inch is a cinch, mile by mile takes a while. So that's what you're trying to be able to do when it comes to trying to promote collaboration amongst groups or members or teams, even partners, even with yourself a lot of the time, me, myself, and I.
Right. Exactly. When you realize that you're in conflict with yourself, there is no place to go. You cannot flee.
Yeah, you
There's
call
no-
Robert. That's what I do. When I'm in conflict with myself, I call Robert.
Well, there you go. All right. So, Robert, just as a point of reference, who do we have on our podcast tonight?
Right now, kind of a total of 20 people. We're live stream on 5 platforms.
Awesome. Awesome. And do we know anything about those folks? Are they expanded learning folks? Are they, or do they do other things?
I'm not sure, but I let them know to leave their email so we can send them a free lesson plan based on tonight's live stream.
Would love to do that. Give them some tips on managing managing group dynamics, right? Which is not an easy task. I can just assure you that the more you try, the better you get, right? But you have to have several horrific failures.
There you go.
And that's part of it, right? And we've talked about that before, that fail is first attempt in learning. It's not the end, it's the beginning. So, all right, yeah.
We either win, right? We're going to win or we're going to learn, right? We don't lose.
That's right.
We're going to win or we're going to learn.
Yep, for sure. And sometimes the learning's better than the winning, right? What Thomas Edison, 10,000 ways not to build a light bulb. Okay, so Robert, what's next?
All right. Our next question is, how can I manage dominant personalities in a group?
Tell them to go away. No, not really. Dominant personalities are what they are. And I think that one of the things that we can do is to certainly give them a role in the group, but maybe the role is to encourage other people to speak up instead of themselves, right? So they can be asking other people questions and listening to answers and then redirecting them rather than just answering them all themselves. I think also it is totally appropriate as the leader of a group to pull a person aside, not in front of the group, but to pull them aside and say, I really appreciate how quickly you process things and how quickly you're able to articulate what's going on in your head. But it would be really helpful if you would allow other people that same opportunity, because some people aren't quick like you are. It takes them a while, but yet they have good ideas. And if you always are speaking out, they may think that they're off the hook, right? And they don't have to speak out. So I'd really appreciate it if you could do that. Or if you want to say something, say it and then pass it on to a next person. So I think that you can talk with people about that. But I think that you have to also value that sometimes they're going to be the only person who rescues you, right? You've asked for somebody to say, what are you thinking? And they are the only person who's going to respond. And you've got to be grateful for that. But you can ask if they're not able to monitor that themselves. I think that that's a learning lesson for them. Okay, Coach, it's to you.
Yeah, I think that's really good and well said. I know in my Bible study, because I've studied the Bible a lot, I only know a couple things really well, right? I know the Bible really well. I know sports really well, and I know business and entrepreneurship really well, right? Discounting that, I'm usually out of my mind on the other things. So I know that about myself. And so I know that there's 7 voices on there, or 9 voices. So I always try to go last, right? So if you are a dominant personality, which I'm not saying that I am, but if I was a dominant personality, you're going to try to go last, right? Because you want to hear all the other answers. And then a lot of times, if they're already saying what you're saying, then don't say anything that go around. Because like Gma said, when you're a quick processor and you're well researched and you have a lot of desire and art and the talent side of things, and you have these systems and structures and you put all those together, you may be the quickest, fastest, strongest in the room. But they won't care about that if you're always answering like that. If you always got to be the sage on the stage, so to speak, they're going to not like that, right? Eventually, people are going to not like that. So go last. I think the other thing is, too, to be able to figure out. So we do this thing in our leadership group, and we call it 4 corners. So we give them a personality test, and we put them in the 4 corners, and we say, okay, look, across diagonally at the person. And I said, you're either going to love them to death, or you're going to be like, I don't know them and I don't want to know them, because they're the opposite, right? So with me, I'm hyper and goofy and all that. My wife's more chill. So opposites attract. She's not too far away from me, and I'm not too far away from her to where we can't come together for some pretty good stuff, right? Now, if she's too far left or I'm too far right, so to speak, then that's going to be an issue. But then I say, okay, now look amongst your own group. And they look at each other and like, I'll bet your highest highs are great with this group because they're like-minded and they're fun and they're neat and they're, and all that. But I said, I'll bet you your lows are really bad too, right? Because so for me and my wife, we're not going to have these super lows because we're going to balance each other out. But if me and the people in my other group here, that could be that could be a problem, right? So we always say, is it personal or is it personality? I said, how many of you have walked into a room at a party or something? You're like, I don't think I care for them over there. We don't even know who they are. But that's probably because they're either so diametrically opposed to who you are that you can't get it, or they're exactly like you, and that's going to present a problem. So I think that those are some good ways to look at it when you're talking about dominant personalities. And I think the best one is what I call the plant, which means that I'm going to go talk to that person behind the scenes, and I'm going to say, look, it's pretty clear that you're a dominant personality. You're faster, you're probably quicker, probably smarter in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean you always have to act first. So you do what you want to do, but I know what I do in that situation is I always go last. And so then you plant that in their head, and then they're not always, taking everything and doing their own thing with it.
Yep. And that's the learning for them, right? Everybody's learning is different. The person who's totally quiet in a group never says a word. They need to learn to speak up, right? They need to learn to put their information and thoughts on the table. Some people will just, vacillate between 2 points. They need to learn to pick one, really make a case and go. So if they're undecided, push it one way or the other. So I think that when we look at groups, there are all kinds of personalities. And I do think that it's important that everybody has a lesson to learn in a group.
Yeah, and I think too, I want to say, so Bobby Knight, who was a basketball coach back in the day, that's why I never argue philosophies with people. I can argue results, right? But I can't argue philosophy. So his philosophy was 52 passes, they're going to score 50. The other team's going to score 48, but they won, right? And again, not everything's a winning and losing situation, but this is competitive sports, right? And a good modus operandi for myself. And then you had Billy Tubbs. He said, when you get out of the bus, shoot. They'd score 110, the other team would score 108, and they would still win. So if Bobby Knight and Billy Tubbs were arguing, why? In the end, you're successful. You're winning, so to speak. And I think that that's, critically important. The other thing I wanted to add in too, no matter what, if there's something in a group and somebody says something that's like, man, that's not the smartest thing I've ever heard, we teach everybody to just say thank you. Because if you don't say thank you to that person, even though the answer they gave you isn't going to get you there this time, they may be the only one that has the answer 10 times down the road, so to speak, as well. So I think that we've got to take all of these things into consideration as leaders of youth, and also as there's going to be dominant leaders of youth, and if you can get them at a younger age, it'll be easier for them as an adult.
Agree, 100%. Okay, Robert, what's up?
All right, our next question is, what techniques encourage quieter group members to participate?
Well, I can tell you they don't like what?
Cattle prod.
Yeah. I can tell you they don't like to be voluntold, right? So I would avoid that if I could. One of the things that I think that you can do to help people who tend to be reticent in far as talking is to do a very simple think, pair, share, right? And they need to think it through themselves first. They need to have a moment to have their own thoughts. And then they may be willing to share with one other person. And then they can share with a group. And then if you have, so that helps. And they may not be the person who speaks to the whole group. They will have at least spoken to the people in that smaller group. The other thing that you can do to encourage that is if you have a consistent small group for maybe a day or two, then explain to them that they're going to rotate. So one day you're going to be the leader, the next day you're going to be the note taker, the next day you're going to be the reporter, so that everybody has that opportunity to do that. But some people truly get distressed, right? When they have to speak out. And that's problematic for them. I mean, they'll be in a cold sweat. having to share information. So what you want to do is be sure that you make people as comfortable as possible. But I think that a think, pair, share, giving somebody an opportunity to think about it, then share with one other person, is always helpful in helping them to want to be able to speak to the whole group.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think that's well said. And, so just like I said, when I was teaching the disc or the shot, I would start by saying, just spin as fast as you can until you fall down. So they would do that. And I go, okay, is anybody going to laugh at you? Not around here, they're not, because we're all going to fall down. I mean, look at Gma and I are professional speakers. Politicians are professional speakers. I've heard them go before. Big deal. That's part of life. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to mess up. We're imperfect. There was only one perfect person that's ever walked the face of the earth, and it's not the doctor, and it's not the coach, and it's not any of our listeners. It may be Robert. I don't know. We're still trying to debate that, right? But the fact of the matter is that that's okay, right? Like, it's okay. So I say inch by inch is a cinch. So just say hi. Everybody can say hi. You don't even have to use words. You can just, wave your hand. Okay. And then we're going to go to the next step. Wave both hands. Okay. Next, say hi. Say it under your breath. If you don't want to say it to somebody else because you're too scared, say it underneath your breath. You can say hi to yourself 20 times. Now I'm going to say, okay, say hi to one person. Now I'm going to say hi to a group. Now, right. And so we're going to continue to pull them along, because the fact of the matter is you will have to speak in front of people. My wife's one of those. She doesn't like to get in front of groups, large groups, small groups, whatever. But she has stuff to say. So what does she do? She has to practice, right? So that's why, one of the smart things they do in college is they make you take a speech class. Everybody hates it, but it's smart because that's something that you have to do. Now, do you have to do an inverse operation to be an adult? I don't think so, because I've never used one in 35 years, right? So there's certain things that we must do to help people, and we don't want to drag them. I talk about the mom who's dragging the kid in Walmart. They're going too fast for them when they're dragging them. We want to slow down and just one step, one step, one step. And then pretty soon they're feeling comfortable to at least, talk in front of a small group. The other thing I do is I call it the right crumble and pass. So I'm not going to let you out of it, right? But that doesn't mean you have to use your mouth all the time. So I'll tell them to write it down, crumble it up, pass it to the neighbor so it gets to me, right? And maybe I'll get 3 or 4 of those, and nobody really knows because they're thinking of their own thoughts and they're talking or whatever. And then I'll read those 2 or 3 out loud. So that'll give them a voice. And then somebody says, oh, wow, that's a really good idea. And then that gives them more confidence for the next go around to actually speak it themselves.
Absolutely. It's a path, isn't it? All right, Robert, it's to you.
Nice. Next question is, how can I teach youth the value of teamwork?
Put them in a team. No, right. I think that one of the most important things we can do in any situation is to debrief. And I think so often we do not debrief about what it is we wanted them to learn. So if you're playing a game and what you want out of it is that people learn the value of teamwork, then you need to debrief about the value of teamwork so that they've just had an experience. They know what that feels like, and then they can reflect on that. And then the question can always be, when might you be in another situation where teamwork will work? How does teamwork different than when you're just happen to be in the same vicinity as someone else? So I think that a lot of times we think that the experience is enough, and I don't believe that. I think that the experience is not enough for everybody. You need to stop. You need to reflect. What about being in a team did you like? What didn't you like, right? How can you make changes? So I think that the debriefing piece is huge. And usually what happens is we do an activity, a learning opportunity, and we push it to the very end and we don't take the time to debrief because we've run out of time. So I think that it's important to be sure that that's built into your lessons so that kids can say, okay, this is what I think about that. So, Coach, I'll pitch it to you.
Yeah, so I was talking to a 20-year-old kid. So he's brand new to us. So I spent a lot of time with him up front, and then I gradually release and just let them do their thing. And one of the things we talked about was the debrief, right? And so at the end of the day, he thinks I'm crazy because we got rid of our brick and mortar a long time ago because why spend $2,000-3,000 a month when everybody works from home anyway, right? And everybody's complaining. Well, we don't. They shouldn't work from home. Da, da, da. I'm like, well, if you don't trust them enough to work from home, probably you hired the wrong guy. But hey, you do whatever you got to do, right? Or gal. So anyway, we're talking. He's looking at me like this guy's crazy, right? Because that's not. And his mom and dad have done a great job with him. He's a great kid, right? And I just happened to meet him at a garage sale, and we were doing cards or whatever. I'm like, hey, you want a job? He goes, I think so. So anyway, we're doing this debrief at the end, right? And so, and we call them different things at the end, whether it's a review or a reflection or a debrief or the downright diagnostics. It's all accomplishing the same thing in the end, which is to get you thinking about your thinking. So I'm a knucklehead, and I said, you know anything about Sesame Street? Well, he's 20 years old. He's like, no. And I said, yeah, you know the one. And he goes, oh, yeah, I know. I said, well, what everybody thought growing up is that Sesame Street taught us as kids our colors, our numbers, our symbols, our shapes. That's not it at all, right? What we learned was when Grandma or Mom sat us down on their lap and said, "What did you learn today?" The debrief. It wasn't the 30 minutes that we watched Sesame Street. It was the 5 minutes that solidified the learning at the end. And so we tell everybody to do that. We say, informally, you should be thinking all the time, what do I like? What do I dislike? What am I undecided about? Celebrate the likes, dislikes, you're going to adjust or pivot. If it's somewhere in the middle, you're undecided. We don't do middles because people are middles, right? They're gray. So we say, ask questions till it becomes a like or a dislike, right? That's how we roll. That's our downright diagnostic. So we do that throughout the day informally, but then we have some very formal things. And people will ask, well, what are the formal things? I'm like, I don't know. What are you trying to accomplish? If what you're trying to accomplish is $100 million, then you should ask questions around that on your debrief. What did I do today to move the needle forward? If what you're trying to do is to help kids to work together as a group, what did you do to move the needle, right? Because inch by inch is a cinch, but you got to put a bunch of inches together before you get your ultimate goal, so to speak, right? So the value of teamwork to me is everything. And yes, it takes a bunch of individuals to do their part to make the big holistic look of the team, but it's the team that matters. If you don't want to be part of a team, then go do individual sports like wrestling or MMA or track and field.
Yeah. Yep. Teamwork is important.
Yes.
So much more than I think we give it credit for, right? I think we don't reward team nearly enough.
Right. And see, as a sports guy my whole life,
Right.
like that statement wouldn't resonate with me. And, we've been talking about that over the last several weeks. It's funny, you don't think sports are that big of a deal in real life, but we've come to the practicality, right? Because this is the practicing ground for the real world for these kids. And I think even more so than I've ever thought in my life after this podcast, we've been doing 10 weeks, 14 weeks, whatever. Sports are so important because everything's already built in. You don't have to manufacture it. It's all built in.
Yep. Okay, Robert, I think we've got time for one more question, maybe two, but one for sure.
All right. The next question is, how do I handle cliques or exclusion with a group?
That's called that in group, right? You're either with me or you don't count. And that's how we allow ourselves to interact with others, right? Sometimes we don't interact at all. We just hold everybody at a distance. And other times we have 2 or 3 friends that we're close to, and we're the in group. Anyway, we're the in group for us, and we're going to keep everybody else away. We're okay and nobody else is. And I think that when you're dealing with that, I think it's important to talk about that because everybody will be on the outs with somebody at some point in time. right? I don't, even your best friend, there are times when you're not on the same page, right? And so learning the fact that, that you're the one who's ostracizing the other person. They may be the perfect match for you, but you won't know that because you're busy protecting this group, this in group that you have. And I think that, you've seen a lot of movies with mean girls, right? And mean girls in the movies are the ones who try and keep their group as the group, right? And they don't want anybody to interfere with that. They don't want anybody to challenge it. And so I think that a simple thing that you can do is be sure that you break up that in-group group so that they are interacting with other people and learning that other people have thoughts too. But sometimes that's very difficult because they will do things that to make sure that they're in a group. We did what was that we did, Brett, that one time called the zipper, and people lined up so that they could be with. Can you tell them about that? Because that was hilarious.
Well, it's funny that you said that because that's what came to mind. So we call it the human zipper, right? So what we do is we have them line up, and as you well know, when unzipping your jacket, the teeth, or the people in this case, they go opposite directions, right? And so what usually happens when people are lining up, they line up next to their best friend, right? So here's me, here's Gmaw, here's Robert. Now we're going different ways, right? Another way that we do that is we say, okay, partner up, everybody. Grab a partner. Well, of course, you're going to go grab the person you're usually with, the in group or whatever, right? And so they go grab a partner. We go, okay, one person sit down. One person sits down. And then we go, okay, those of you that are standing, come over with me. You're on one team. This is on the other team, right? So
Right.
We have all these tricks, what I call in setup, which would be the human zipper, or grab somebody and sit them down. There's a bunch of different ways that you could get people to where they're not just so clicky all the time. And I got more to say about that when you're done, Gmo.
Oh no, I just think I think that there's strategies, right? And it's that's why, like in inside outside circles that I described. Okay, I'm going to line up across from somebody, and then I'm going to move the circles, and now you're not with that somebody anymore. And I think that that's important because people. Have you ever noticed how when people come into a setting, they always sit with the same people, right? Because they're comfortable there. They know them. They feel, there's a camaraderie there. And so get them up, move them around, have them not be able to do that because they don't need to just hear themselves over and over because they probably have picked friends who think like them to a certain degree. So that's all I was going to say. So go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, so I got a lot to say about this. I only got 2 minutes, so hopefully I'll go fast. So I went to West High my freshman year, and it was clicky like that. Like the stoners hung with the stoners, the band people hung with the band people, the sport people hung with the sport people, so on and so forth. And I didn't like that, right? I thought I was taught that we all put our pants on the same way. We're all people. We're all this. So when I went and played summer baseball, it was South High guys, and they were all together, right? So it didn't matter whether you were the band person or the sports guy or the chemistry, but whatever. We all just hung out. So I asked my mom, hey, can I go to South High? Because I didn't like it out West. So I think that there's one thing right there, right? So it's easy to be in the in crowd, so to speak, but I think that's a bunch of bull. Number two, my special day kids. So 16 of them. They're already in 7th and 8th grade. They're reading at a first grade level. What the heck am I going to do that everybody else hasn't already done with them? Sound it out. Do this, every strategy. You know what I did? Is I partnered them up with the cool kids, right? Joe Jock and then the cheerleader, right? And I went and had my Down syndrome kids go and work out with them. So what happened to their grade? They used to put us on not even on part of the campus. I told the principal in year one, I said, that ain't happening anymore. You're going to put us in with everybody else. So anyway, my kids started walking with the cool kids. They knew the cool kids too, right? So they're walking around. Now, I don't agree with cool kids. I'm just telling you what it was like back in the day. So what happened? Their grades went up 2, 3, 4 grade levels. It wasn't anything I did. It's because their esteem went up because they were getting to walk around. They were being seen for the first time, so on and so forth, right? So when you talk about these cliques or an exclusion, I don't play that, right? We're all putting on our pants or our skirts or whatever the exact same way. So we're all people. We're all trying to do the best we can. You're no better than I am. Now you may be better at this one thing. I may be able to throw a football further than Grandma can, but I can't screw a screw 2 inches like Robert can. Robert can screw and do things and fix my whole patio in 2 seconds. So there's a lot there. I wish I had a little bit more time to elaborate, but let's not get it confused about cliques and exclusions. They're unacceptable.
All right, you went out for just a second, so thank you.